My name is Dr. Bonechill. For years I've stood at the precipice of loss, a quiet observer in the theater of grief. You see, I'm a funeral director, and if you think that's a profession that offers a steady, predictable rhythm of life and death, you're only half right. There's a secret, a dark current that runs beneath the polished veneer of our work, a truth whispered in hushed tones between the embalming fluid and the scent of lilies. They say that dealing with death for so long, day in and day out, changes you. It doesn't just dull the edges of your own fear. It sharpens your perception, opens your eyes to things that most people are blessed to remain blind to. And sometimes, just sometimes, it's not a gift at all. It's a curse, a terrifying revelation that once seen can never be unseen. What if the very fabric of our ordinary lives, the things we touch, the places we inhabit, are merely thin veils over something utterly unimaginably ancient and malevolent? What if the most disturbing truths are not found in the shadows but in the mundane, waiting to be stumbled upon? Before we dive into these tales, these fragments of dread I've collected, I need you to do something for me. If you're brave enough to listen, if you feel that chill crawling up your spine, hit that like button. It helps us here at Dr. Bonechill reach more souls, more people who might need to hear these warnings. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to help us reach our goal of 10,000 subscribers. Every click, every new subscriber, it's a silent acknowledgement that you're willing to confront the darkness with us. And as always, I want to hear your thoughts. Comment below what you felt, what experiences you've had that brushed against the inexplicable. Your stories, your fears, they matter here. The night I found it, the sky over Elmwood Drive was a bruised purple, swollen with an impending storm. The air hung thick and heavy, the kind of stillness that precedes a scream. My house, a modest two-story with a porch swing and a rose garden, felt suddenly too small, too quiet. I'd lived in that house for 15 years, alone since Sarah left. The routine was my anchor. Wake, coffee, work at the funeral home, dinner, a book, bed, rinse and repeat. But that night the routine shattered. I was out on the porch watching the distant flicker of lightning when something caught my eye, half buried in the damp soil of my neglected flower bed. It was a small, ornate compass no bigger than a pocket watch. The casing was a dark, polished obsidian, cool and smooth against my fingertips. Instead of cardinal directions, the dial was etched with symbols I didn't recognize, twisted, flowing, lines that seemed to writhe even as I looked at them. The needle, a sliver of dull silver, twitched erratically, pointing nowhere and everywhere all at once. It felt ancient, and strangely, intensely personal, as if it had been waiting for me. I brought it inside, placing it on the polished oak of my living room table. The storm broke then, a furious torrent of rain lashing against the windows, thunder rattling the very foundations of the house. The power flickered, then died, plunging the room into a sudden, suffocating darkness. In the brief, intense flash of lightning that followed, I saw the compass. The obsidian gleamed, and the strange symbols on its face seemed to pulse with a faint, internal light. The needle, instead of its frantic dance, now held steady, pointing directly at the wall behind. My favorite armchair, it was just a wall, of course. Plaster, lath, insulation. But a cold knot of curiosity tightened in my stomach. I got a flashlight from the kitchen and aimed its beam where the needle pointed. Nothing, just the faded floral wallpaper. Still, the compass on the table continued to hum, a low, almost imperceptible vibration I felt more than heard. The needle remained locked. Over the next few days, the compass became an unsettling companion. It never left the oak table, and its needle, without fail, pointed to that same spot on the wall. I tried moving it, turning it, even burying it in a drawer. But no matter what I did, it would inevitably right itself, its needle always returning to that impossible point. The air around that particular spot on the wall grew colder, perceptibly so, even on a warm afternoon. A faint, almost imperceptible scent began to waft from it, something earthy, like damp soil, and something else, something metallic, like Old blood. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was my imagination, a trick of the mind. But the compass, silent and unmoving, was a constant, chilling reminder. My sleep became fractured, haunted by vague, unsettling dreams of shadows stretching, of whispers just beyond the edge of hearing. I started to hear a faint scratching sound coming from behind the wall, a soft, persistent scraping, like something trying to claw its way out. It was rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat, slow and deliberate. One evening, after a particularly draining day at the funeral home, a young child, a tragedy that always leaves a lingering ache, I came home to find the scratching louder, more insistent. The air in the living room was thick with that strange metallic scent. I stood before the wall, the compass on the table, a black, gleaming eye. The needle was vibrating now, a frantic tremor that mirrored the frantic beating of my own heart. I touched the wallpaper where it pointed. It was ice cold. And then, faintly, undeniably, I felt something press back against my hand from within. My breath hitched. Denial warred with a growing, suffocating terror. What could be behind there? An old pipe? A nest of rats? The scratching grew louder, more frantic, and now I could hear a low, guttural moan. A sound that wasn't animal, wasn't human. It was something else entirely. A sound of ancient, boundless suffering. I went to the garage, retrieved a small crowbar. My hands were shaking, slick with sweat. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to leave the house, to throw the compass into the deepest part of the river. But a perverse, morbid fascination, spurred by that silent, demanding obsidian eye on the table, held me captive. The wallpaper tore easily. Beneath it, the plaster crumbled with surprising ease, revealing not lath and studs, but a dark, damp cavity. The air that rushed out was putrid, filled with the stench of decay and something else, something cloying and sweet, like rotted flowers. And in the cavity, illuminated by the single beam of my flashlight, was not what I expected. Not pipes, not insulation. It was a tangle of something organic, something that pulsed faintly, like a massive dormant heart. It was rooted to the wall, a grotesque growth of black, leathery tendrils that stretched into the darkness beyond my sight. And among the tendrils, glinting wetly, were shards of bone, fragments of teeth, and what looked disturbingly like mummified flesh. The scratching wasn't from something trying to get out. It was the sound of something trying to get in, trying to emerge. The compass on the table vibrated so violently now it threatened to slide off. Its needle, fixed on the horror within the wall, glowed with an eerie green luminescence. I heard a wet sucking sound from the cavity, a slurping noise, and then a faint, ragged breath. The moan grew louder, deeper, becoming a low, continuous drone that vibrated through the floorboards, through my very bones. I dropped the crowbar. The sound of it clattering on the floor was swallowed by the expanding, echoing moan. I backed, away, my eyes wide and unblinking, fixed on the abomination in the wall. The tendrils twitched. The growth pulsed, more violently now. And then from the depths of the cavity, a single pale, unblinking eye opened, a cold, hungry orb that seemed to drink in the meager light from my flashlight. I didn't scream. My throat was too tight, too dry. The terror was too profound for such an ordinary sound. I just stood there paralyzed, watching as the eye swiveled, fixing its gaze directly on me. And then, in a voice that was not a voice, a thought that resonated directly in my mind, ancient and chillingly clear, it spoke. You found me. Now you will help me wake. I don't remember leaving the house. I don't remember driving. I just remember the ceaseless pounding of rain against the windshield, the wipers struggling to clear a path through the deluge, and the obsidian compass, clutched in my hand, its needle still glowing, still pointing. It was pointing to the passenger seat beside me where the absence of Sarah had always been. But now it felt like something else entirely was filling that space, something formless and cold, riding with me into the storm-swept night. I never went back to the house on Elmwood Drive. The compass is still with me, tucked away, but I can feel its pull, its constant, silent demand. And sometimes, when the thunder rolls, I hear that moan, not from the house, but from somewhere inside me, a whisper from the growing horror I now carry. The old antique shop on Miller's Lane was a place I usually avoided. Too dusty, too crammed with forgotten histories, echoes of lives long past. But the day the storm hit, really hit, the power went out across the entire district, and my own generator at the funeral home decided to sputter and die. I needed batteries, and Miller's Lane was the only place open, running on a clunky old lantern, its flickering light casting long, dancing shadows. The air inside was thick with the scent of aged wood and something else. Something faintly sweet like dried flowers, and just as faintly, something like old rust. I found the batteries, thankfully, but as I turned to leave, something caught my eye. Tucked away on a high shelf, almost obscured by a stack of moth-eaten tapestries, was a porcelain doll. It wasn't a charming cherubic doll. This one was different. Her face was cracked, a hairline fracture running from her left temple down to her chin, like a spider web spun across a delicate canvas. One of her blue glass eyes was missing, leaving a hollow, shadowed socket. Her dress, once probably a pristine white lace, was now yellowed and tattered. Yet despite her brokenness, there was an unsettling stillness about her, a sense of deep, patient waiting. And in her single remaining eye, there was an odd, almost knowing gleam. I don't know why I bought her. Impulse, perhaps. A strange pity. The shopkeeper, a wizened old woman with eyes that seemed to see more than they let on, gave me a peculiar look when I brought the doll to the counter. "She chooses her owners, dearie," she rasped, her voice like dry leaves skittering across pavement, "and she tends to be possessive." I brushed off her words as the ramblings of an eccentric old woman, paid her a surprisingly small sum, and carried the doll out into the raging thunderstorm, feeling the wind try to snatch her from my grasp. Back at the funeral home, the power still out, I placed the doll on a dusty, unused shelf in my office. The storm intensified, the rain drumming a frantic rhythm against the windows. The silence in the unlit building, punctuated only by the storm's fury, was oppressive. I kept glancing at the doll. Even in the gloom, illuminated only by the occasional flash of lightning, that single glass eye seemed to follow me. I told myself it was the angle, a trick of the light. But then things started to happen. Small things at first. My keys, left on my desk, would be found on the floor. A file I'd been working on would be subtly shifted. A faint, almost imperceptible scent of lilacs would drift through the office, though there were no flowers in the room. I'd find myself looking over my shoulder, feeling a chill breath on my neck, though no one else was there. And always, when I turned, the doll's single eye seemed to be fixed on me, unblinking. The cracking in her face, I noticed, seemed to deepen, to extend. The hairline fracture branched out, forming new delicate lines across her porcelain skin. And sometimes, when I was alone, I would hear a soft, almost inaudible giggle, thin and reedy, like a child's laughter carried on the wind. I'd freeze, listening, but it would always fade, leaving me to question my own sanity. The nightmares began, vivid, unsettling dreams of a little girl, always just out of reach, her face obscured, her laughter echoing in empty corridors. She was always searching for something, a lost toy, a hidden room, and in the background a storm raged just like the one that brought the doll to me. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, the memory of the dream fading, but the feeling of profound unease, clinging to me like a shroud. One evening I was working late, preparing a body for viewing. The rain outside was relentless, and the funeral home felt colder than usual. I could hear the constant drip of water somewhere in the old building, a slow, methodical sound that began to grate on my nerves. As I worked, I felt a familiar, unsettling presence. I didn't need to look. I knew it was the doll. I finished my task and went back to the office. The doll was no longer on the shelf. My heart leapt into my throat. I scanned the room, my breath catching, and then I saw her. She was sitting on my desk chair facing the doorway, her single eye staring directly at me. The missing eye socket seemed deeper, darker, an abyss, and the cracks on her face had worsened, spreading like a spider web across her entire face as if her delicate skin was about to shatter. I walked over, my hand reaching out, trembling. As my fingers brushed against her cold porcelain cheek, I felt a faint vibration. And then, undeniably, a small, child-sized hand closed around my fingers, its grip surprisingly strong, cold as ice. I yelped, pulling my hand back as if burned. The faint giggle I'd heard before was now clearer, closer. It seemed to emanate from the doll itself. And then, from the hollow of her missing eye, a thin, shimmering tear, impossibly clear, began to fall, tracing a path down her cracked cheek. It was a tear of profound sadness, of endless sorrow. And then I heard it whispered, not in my mind, but directly in the air beside me, a thin, reedy voice. He hurt me. Find him. My blood ran cold. The doll was alive. Or something within it was. A consciousness. A memory. Trapped within the shattered porcelain. The rain outside seemed to swell. A frantic drumming that matched the frantic beat of my own heart. The room felt suddenly heavy, choked with the doll's sorrow. I didn't know who he was, or what he had done, but the doll's single eye, gleaming, with an unearthly light, seemed to pierce right through me, demanding, pleading. The cracks on her face continued to spread, almost audibly, a faint tinkling sound like breaking glass. And from the hollow of her missing eye, the tears flowed faster, forming a small, cold puddle on my desk. I spent the rest of the night in a state of terrified vigilance, unable to sleep, unable to look away from that silent, weeping doll. Every shadow seemed to shift. Every creak of the old building sounded like a footstep. I felt like I was no longer alone in the funeral home, that the doll had brought something else with her, something that lurked just beyond the periphery of my sight. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a world scrubbed clean, dripping with water. But the doll remained, sitting on my desk chair, her single eye still fixed on me. The tears had dried, leaving faint, shimmering trails. And though the cracks had spread, they had not shattered her. Instead, they seemed to solidify, to become a permanent part of her, a map of ancient pain. I couldn't bring myself to touch her again. I couldn't throw her away. She had chosen me, as the old woman said. And now, I was bound to her, to the silent, insistent demand in her single, weeping eye. I knew with a horrifying certainty that my search had just begun. The rain hadn't let up for 3 days straight when I found the pocket watch. It wasn't the kind of storm you just weather. It felt biblical, like the sky was weeping a sorrow so profound it threatened to drown the world. My usual route home, from the funeral home through the quiet tree-lined streets of Mapleside, was waterlogged. Puddles had become small lakes, and the air hummed with a heavy, damp chill. It was on the edge of one of these impromptu lagoons, half submerged in muddy water near an ancient oak, that I saw it. A glint of tarnished silver. It was an old pocket watch, no doubt about it. The casing was heavily oxidized, the kind of dark, dull silver that only time and neglect can create. Its face was a murky cream, stained with what looked like dried mud, and the hands were frozen at 12 o'clock. There was no glass protecting the face, just an empty circle. It felt impossibly cold when I picked it up, a chill that went straight, through my gloves and into my bones, even colder than the driving rain. Despite the grime, I could make out intricate, almost microscopic engravings on the back. A weeping willow, a gravestone, and beneath it, a single looping initial, an M. It looked like something from another century, a relic of a life long forgotten. I brought it inside, placing it on a piece of newspaper on my kitchen counter, hoping it would dry out. The house felt vast and empty, the rain outside creating a lonely soundtrack. The power was still out, a familiar, unsettling darkness. In the flickering glow of a flashlight, the watch seemed to hum with a faint, almost imperceptible vibration. I tried to pry open the back to see the mechanism, but it was sealed shut, as if the watch were a single, unyielding piece of metal. Its broken hands remained fixed at noon. Over the next few days, as the storm slowly abated, the watch became a subtle, insistent presence. I cleaned off the worst of the mud, revealing more of the intricate etching, but the tarnished silver remained, a permanent layer. I kept it on my bedside table. I started to notice a strange phenomenon, a persistent, almost phantom chime. It wasn't a loud sound, just a faint, ethereal ding that seemed to emanate from the watch itself. It would happen at odd hours, in the dead of night, in the quiet of dawn, sometimes even in the middle of a phone call. I'd look at the watch, but its hands never moved, forever stuck at 12. Then the dreams began. Not nightmares, not at first. They were more like memories, vivid and detailed. But they weren't mine. I was a different man, living in a different time. I saw cobblestone streets, gas lamps, horse-drawn carriages. I felt the unfamiliar scratch of wool against my skin, the scent of coal smoke in the air. I saw a young woman with kind eyes, her hair piled high, wearing a dark, modest dress. And I felt a profound, aching love for her. We would talk, laugh, walk hand in hand through sun-dappled parks. It was beautiful, poignant. But always in the background, a clock would strike noon. And then, a shadow would fall. The dreams grew, darker. The man in the dreams, I, would start to feel a sense of dread, a chilling premonition. The young woman would become anxious, her laughter tinged with fear. And then, inevitably, a storm would gather, the skies turning bruised and ominous, mimicking the one that brought the watch to me. In these dreams, the phantom chime of the watch would become a desperate, frantic tolling, growing louder and louder until I jolted awake, drenched in sweat, the ding, ding, ding echoing in my ears even after I opened my eyes. One night, I woke to the phantom chime impossibly loud, reverberating through my skull. The air in my bedroom was thick with a cloying scent like old roses and something else, something that reminded me of embalming fluid. I sat up, my heart hammering against my ribs. The pocket watch on my bedside table was vibrating, a low, guttural hum that I could feel through the mattress. The tarnished silver in the dim light of my digital clock seemed to pulse faintly, almost as if it were breathing. And then, I heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible scratching sound coming from inside the watch itself. It was the frantic, desperate scratching of something trying to get out. The ding, ding, ding escalated, becoming a frenzied clang, as if an invisible bell inside the watch was being struck repeatedly, violently. And then, from the unglassed face of the watch, a mist began to seep out, thin and vaporous, swirling with a faint, phosphorescent green glow. The mist swirled, coalescing into a faint, shimmering outline directly above the watch. And then, indistinct, at first but slowly, horrifyingly taking shape, I saw her. The woman from my dreams. Her face was translucent, her features indistinct. But her eyes, those kind eyes I'd loved in the dreams, were filled with an unbearable sorrow, a silent, desperate plea. Her hair, once piled high, now hung limp and wet around her spectral face. And then, I saw the other figure, a shadow, a hulking, indistinct mass that loomed behind her, its form shifting, coalescing from the mist. It was silent, but its presence filled the room with an icy dread that was physical, crushing. And as I watched, horrified, the shadow reached out, its formless hand closing around the spectral wrist of the woman. She didn't scream. She couldn't. Her translucent mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Only that look of profound, eternal sorrow in her eyes. The pocket watch on my table shuddered violently, the clang now deafening, tearing at my eardrums. The hands, which had been frozen at 12, now began to twitch, to jerk, attempting to move. They strained, fighting against some unseen force, but they couldn't advance. They only vibrated, a frantic, futile struggle. And then, a thought clear as a bell entered my mind. Not my own, but hers. The woman in the mist. He stopped my time. He keeps me here. The shadow tightened its grip on her wrist. Her spectral form began to distort, to ripple, like water disturbed by a stone. The light in her eyes, That faint, sad luminescence began to fade. The smell of old roses and embalming fluid intensified, filling my lungs, choking me. I felt the overwhelming, crushing weight of something ancient, something that had been waiting, trapped within the watch, for centuries. I knew, with a horrifying certainty, that this wasn't just a ghost. This was a soul, held captive. Her time, stopped by whatever malevolent force clung to this tarnished relic. And the watch, it wasn't just a device for telling time. It was a prison, a cursed object holding a history of unspeakable cruelty. I understood then why its hands were fixed. At 12, why it refused to move. It was trapped in a moment of endless despair. I didn't try to touch the watch. I just stared at the fading spectral woman, at the looming shadow behind her, at the frantically vibrating hands that longed to move forward but couldn't. When the first hint of dawn seeped through my window, the mist receded. The spectral forms vanished and the watch went silent. But the smell lingered, and the feeling of that unending dread, the profound sorrow, was etched into my very soul. The watch is still on my bedside table. I can't throw it away. I can't move it. And every now and then, in the dead of night, I hear the phantom chime, a desperate, silent plea from the woman trapped within its tarnished casing. And I know that, just like the others, I am now a part of this story, a witness to a torment that transcends time, forever bound to a cursed object and the terrible, hidden power it holds. And there you have them, my friends. 3 whispers from the dark, tales of ordinary objects becoming conduits for something truly terrifying. These aren't just stories I've heard. They're the kinds of truths that emerge when you spend your life, as I do here at Dr. Bonechill, among the quiet secrets of the departed. They linger, these stories, long after the storm has passed and the lights come back on. They claw at the edges of your perception, making you wonder. What if the ordinary things around you, the trinkets you pick up, the heirlooms you cherish, are holding something more than just memories? What hidden power might be lurking, waiting for the right moment, for the perfect storm to reveal itself? If these tales have sent a shiver down your spine, if they've made you look at your own surroundings a little differently, then please hit that like button. Your support helps us keep bringing these dark truths to light. If you haven't already, subscribe to Dr. Bonechill. We're pushing towards 10,000 subscribers, and every single one of you makes a difference. And as always, I want to hear your thoughts, your own experiences with the inexplicable. Comment below and share what truly chills you. Until next time, stay vigilant. The world is far stranger than you know.